Okay, I'm going to be baking like 3 different things today. And they're all LMTTs that I've never tried. One just happened this morning when I was drinking my coffee and watching the Pioneer Woman. And she made orange sweet rolls, and as she was making them, I was like, I have all of those ingredients, and I'm going to make that. So the next thing I'm making today came from the Smitten Kitchen cookbook. Into flour mixture until they're blah blah, coarse blah, crumb base, pan, blah, within. Okay, sorry, you guys are cricket again. I bought this cookbook off of Amazon.com because it had a ton of really good reviews, and I had no idea what it was. And then when I got it home and I read it, she apparently is a blogger, like a really popular blogger. And I started reading about her in this book, and I was like, I dig this lady a lot. So I've got several things that I want to try from here. We're going to be making the Cranberry Crumb bars with Mulling spices, and then perhaps the lemon bars too. I'll see how far I get today. Let me try that. Cranberry Crumb bars. Someone in my comments mentioned that you say it OXO, you don't say OXO. But OXO isn't as cute because when I say OXO, it reminds me of XOXO, hugs and kisses. And OXO reminds me of an ox, which is, I guess, or Chinese maybe. Chinese zodiac, that's what it is. The recipe asks me to preheat the oven to 375. This is the oven thermometer I was talking about. As you can see, mine has received a lot of abuse, but it's trusty and dependable, and it hangs. And I've had it drop in my food once. It was bad, I shouldn't have done that. But I set it right in the center of my oven, preheat my oven, and then it tells me exactly. Sometimes when I set my oven to 400 degrees, it heats to 425, and I didn't even realize. And this is so handy and accurate for telling the temperature of what your oven is. And if you have an older oven like I do, and you have one of those like spin dials to set the temperature, I find it is more accurate when I put it like all the way to 500 and then back it down to what I want. If I just go to it, it's usually off. I don't know why. Hand. Tip. It says to get a 9 by 13 inch baking dish. This is not quite. I actually think this is 8 by 13, but I don't really care. It's close enough. I'm just going to have a thicker bar. So, it tells me line the bottom of a 9 by 13 inch baking pan with parchment and butter the sides and the parchment. So I have my parchment paper. For those of you who don't know what that looks like, I've used wax paper once on accident, and then I almost set the whole freaking kitchen on fire because it was smoking in the oven and the wax was melting and you could smell it. And I think you can put wax paper in the oven, but I wouldn't recommend it. I did because I thought you could or something, I don't know, but parchment paper is what you want. And I will never buy wax paper again. I've cut off about a tablespoon of butter, and I'm just going to rub the sides. Butter smells so good, especially if it's unsalted sweet cream butter, which is what I prefer using always. And I'm even going to do it down into the bottom a little bit, just so the parchment paper will stick. And in case the parchment paper shifts, I'm going to have at least the edges greased. I'm going to keep the ends a little longer so that I can use it like a cradle and lift out the bars when I'm done. If the parchment sits exactly on the bottom, you're going to have to get a spatula in there and lift up the bars. But I saw this on Joy for Baking on YouTube, and she makes it longer, probably longer than I do, so that when you bake the bars, you can just lift them out. It's a pretty incredible tip. That butter is helping it to stick nicely. I like that trick. I didn't realize it would stick that well. I think I might always do it like that. She wants me to butter also the parchment paper, so I will definitely abide by her baking instructions. And then she says, in a large, wide-ish bowl, whisk together the flour, sugar, salt, baking powder, and spices. And with a pastry blender or a fork, work the chilled butter and the egg into the flour mixture. Now, I would typically do this in my food processor because it's just so fast, brr, 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 and then all of a sudden it's crumbled and you have the dough. But I'm going to do this by hand because I assume a lot of you might not have a food mixer, and I want you to see how easy it is, how difficult it is. Maybe it'll compel you to buy a food processor. A food processor is my most favorite investment as of recent, and I make my pie doughs in there because it takes cold butter, cuts it right into the flour, and you've got a crumbly, just a perfect dough with no effort. And doing it with a pastry blender or a fork takes more effort than I'm willing to put in, but I'm going to do it anyhow. So let me get the flour and all that stuff. 3 cups of all-purpose flour. Whoa. I usually weigh the flour, but because this isn't expected to rise or do anything but make a crumb, I'm okay with not weighing it. 3 cups of flour, 1 cup of sugar, half a teaspoon table salt, I prefer the aluminum-free baking powder. Look for it, use it, love it. They want 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Another reason I love this can is because you can just dig in there and then scrape off an exact amount. Isn't that wonderful? I love it. And now the spices. Half a teaspoon cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon nutmeg, a very fall-esque recipe. I have these little Farberware. My husband got them for me because I don't have anything with 1/8 teaspoon, and I don't feel comfortable guessing yet. Sometimes, usually, kind of, sometimes I do. Anyway, they've got a magnet on the back, and I stick them to my fridge, or I stick them anywhere a magnet goes, so to save on drawer space, and I really actually quite like them. 1/8 teaspoon cloves, ground cloves, and 1/8 teaspoon allspice. She asks me to whisk this together, but I don't want to waste a whisk when I can just use the fork I'm going to use to cut in the butter, so I'm just going to pick a giant serving fork from my drawer and mix this together. Okay, then she asks me for an egg, 2 sticks of chilled butter. Now, to help me out with this, I am going to cut this with the fork, because I don't want to waste a knife, a little bit before I add it. So I'm just going to put chunks of the butter. I'm just going to do this the painful way and not use my food processor and just chop at all of this butter for a very long time until it resembles coarse meal. It's been 25 seconds and I'm already really annoyed, so I'm going to put my ring on my elephant and literally just scrunch it with my hands. Break up the butter and just pulverize it with my hands. Who has time for that? Using a fork? Get out of here! Are you crazy? So I'm just grinding it in my hands and kind of mushing it together, trying not to really overwork it. Just breaking up the large pieces of butter. I think we're getting there. It has been 3 minutes of this nonsense. And you should be able to feel like the dough is a little damp, and when you squeeze it, it kind of holds its shape like that, because you are making this into the crumb bottom, the crust bottom, or whatever. Okay? I'm calling that good. Brr, 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 brr. And I'm going to smash half of the mixture into the pan. And then it notes that it will be thin. Of course, it won't be as thin for me because I am using, I think, is an 8 by 13 versus a 9 by 13. Okay, I'm going to measure this. The most accurate way to measure your pan, if you don't know how big it is not from end to end because it flares out. It's the bottom surface of your... My mom's texting me, sorry. So what I would typically should have done, if I was curious as to how big this pan was, is I would flip it upside down and measure the bottom where the stuff sits. And this is an 11 by 8. This is when you should really read the recipes beforehand, because now it's asking me, in the bowl of a food processor or blender, pulse the filling ingredients until the berries are coarsely chopped but not pureed. Man! So I would have needed a food processor anyway. I was trying to spare you guys the need to do that, but alas, they have to put their stamp on the place, ... Hopefully it will tone down soon. Filling is a ½ teaspoon freshly grated orange zest, 1½ tablespoons orange juice, 3 cups of fresh cranberries, which is 340 grams or a 12-ounce bag, and ½ cup of sugar and 1 tablespoon cornstarch. I'm going to put all the ingredients in here. Pretty difficult to find fresh cranberries any time of year. Thank goodness it's Thanksgiving and I've got them. This is a 12-ounce bag, and I'm just going to pour the cranberries. Seems full. ½ cup of sugar, or 100 grams, 1 tablespoon cornstarch. I'm going to use my microplaner and get about a teaspoon of this in here. One and a half tablespoons of the juice. Got ½ teaspoon freshly grated orange zest, 1½ tablespoons, which is 25 milliliters orange juice, 3 cups fresh cranberries, or 340 grams, or a 12-ounce bag, ½ cup or 100 grams sugar, and 1 tablespoon cornstarch, and I'm going to pulse it. She says, briefly pulse the filling ingredients until the berries are coarsely chopped but not pureed, and then spread the filling over the crumb base. Sprinkle or spread the filling over the crumb base. For the rest of the crumb base, it reads to sprinkle the remaining crumbs evenly over the cranberry mixture. So we're not pressing it, we're just giving it a crumble topping. Seems like a lot of topping, but I did use a much smaller pan. Oh well. Then we bake them for 30 to 35 minutes or until lightly brown on top. Okay, it asked me to bake it for 30 to 35 minutes. I set my timer at 15 minutes so that I could spin the pan around for more even baking, and I also need to keep an eye on it since I used the wrong size of pan. Hi, I'm going to try cranberry bar. Shall we look at its glory? That's a pretty thick crust. If you had the right size pan, and I do have the right size pan, it's just I didn't pull it out. I pulled the other one out first. It's so beautiful. Wow. That's really good. You can taste just a little bit of the orange. The crumble has just the right amount of cinnamon, clove type flavor, not overwhelming at all. The crumb sticks nicely. I can almost lift the entire bar. Cranberry is not too sweet at all. I think it's just the perfect amount. If you like more of a candied bar, maybe add a little bit more sugar, but I would not add more sugar. But some people don't like the taste of cranberry if it's not completely doused in sugar. I don't mind it. It's so good. Wow. My crust on the bottom is a little damp. I'm thinking because it was too thick because I had a smaller pan. Definitely does not compromise the taste. Probably a texture thing. I like this a lot. I was going to take it to work, but I wonder if I could freeze some of it. This would be perfect in the morning. It's not too sweet at all. With your tea or your coffee or orange juice. That's real nice. I rate this a 10 out of 10. I feel like I'm being too easy on them, but then again, this came from that cookbook that was tried out by that blogger who has tried tons of recipes, and so she probably found a lot of 10 out of 10s, and maybe that's why that cookbook has such high ratings, because all of those recipes are like hand-picked by her and tried over and over. That cranberry is really good. Man, 10 out of 10. Hand